Welcome back to the Budget Gamer channel. Today we're going to be taking a look at a really unique indie called My Big Sister. Now before you get the wrong idea from the title that this might be some sort of a dress-up game or something, My Big Sister is actually an indie horror title done in a classic top-down RPG style with a really unique adventure feel. But don't worry, if you're the kind of player who's not really into the horror genre, this one does not focus on jump scares at all, and even the blood is 8-bit pixels. So it's likely nothing that's going to leave you awake at night or give you nightmares. But that being said, the story itself is rich and deep and creepy. The game description lets us know that this is not the story of Luzia, but of her older sister Sombra, and how they were both abducted and dragged into this mystery beyond their control. And that the story encapsulated in this game is the story of how Luzia helps her big sister Sombra make it back home. However, the one hook line the developer leads us with is that Sombra is no longer Sombra, and that besides navigating their way back home, they'll have a much larger mystery to solve. Though Luzia and her big sister live in a somewhat suburban environment, most of the gameplay takes place in 8-bit renditions of everywhere from enchanted forests to a dingy yet mysterious Chinatown. And as you make your way through bathhouses and back alleys, finding hidden items and solving puzzles will aid you in unfurling a deeper and more twisted story with every step you take. Though this is definitely a horror adventure indie, within the first half hour or so of gameplay, it takes on the role of psychological thriller. There's so much intrigue to the subtext in the game that the longer you play and the closer you get to your goal at the end of the game, the harder it is to tell what's actually going on. And though the game itself isn't loaded with decision trees that'll end up painting you into a corner, there are multiple endings depending on how you play the game. And I have to say this is probably one of the most difficult reviews I've ever done because there is so much about this game that I want to talk about. However, saying too much more about any of the actual gameplay or any of the character dynamics might risk spoiling it for somebody. But what I can tell you is that each character you'll interact with in the entirety of the game is very well developed. Dialogue interactions seem fresh and original, and the light childish comedy, even in the midst of certain stressful situations, never actually seems out of place. Accordingly, the chippy music in the game is very well suited to the emotional drives behind each of the scenes you might be in, but if you do spend too long trying to figure out a puzzle, you might hear it repeat once or twice. Other than that, movement is simple with either the arrow keys or ASWD, and the only hang-ups I found with the actual gameplay itself is that some of the corners are pretty tight. You might eventually find yourself trying to walk through an open doorway that you just can't seem to get through, but toggling the arrow keys back and forth once or twice will let you slip through it. But despite that incredibly minor critique, I'd have to say that this game, being between 3 and 5 hours depending on if you're just trying to complete it, or if you're trying to unlock all the achievements, is completely worth the $5.99 price tag. Overall, I'd have to say that My Big Sister has a story in this game that's unlike anything I'd ever played, and instead of feeling unusual, even though it was littered with Easter eggs, felt completely unique. And even though I did dedicate myself to beating the game in one sitting, as soon as I saw the ending credits, I dove back in through the chapter select to try and find the other endings. So be warned, if you do start this game, you probably won't stop until you beat it because you will want to know how it ends. Well, that about wraps up the review of My Big Sister. So if you enjoyed the review or found it helpful, feel free to throw me a like or a comment to show your support. And don't forget to click that little bell icon when you subscribe to stay updated with the latest content. New, unique, and just plain incredible indies are coming out almost every day, so there's always going to be something new to find right here. So don't forget to check out our Patreon page or follow us on Instagram or Twitter. But anyway, this has been Budget Gamer, so as always, thanks for watching.